There are 5 mechanisms that language depends on in order to function. These mechanisms are necessary features of the map. They are the linguistic mechanisms that allow us to put the world into words. None of these 5 mechanisms actually exist in the world. They exist only in the mechanics of language. They are part of the map. But we end up thinking that all 5 of these things are actually true about the world itself. And this profoundly distorts our experience of being alive. Let's start with the most basic mechanism that language depends on: separation. In order to function at all, our language draws lines of separation between absolutely everything in the world. It must establish each particular thing as distinct from every other thing. This is a prerequisite for assigning words to the world. You have to divide the world up into separate things in order to even begin using language in the first place. If you go down to any city park on a Saturday or Sunday and watch a parent with a toddler, this is exactly what's going on. The parent is naming the world for her child. The baby points at something and says something unintelligible, and the parent softly and insistently says the word for the thing. So already in the first year of our life, the process of learning to speak is having a profound impact on how we see the world. The world is not a place where one thing flows into another. It is an assemblage of things, each separated, isolated, and named. Language requires us to slice the world into individual separate things. And so, from a young age, this is how we think the world actually is. When we look at this picture, for example, we see a canyon, a river, plants, trees, rocks, and so on. The sky is separate from the canyon, and the ocean in the distance is separate from the river. Somewhere in the haze above, the sun is shining, separate from all of this. In the world itself, none of these separations are actually there. All these separations exist on our map, but they are not really there in the world itself. In the actual world, none of these so-called things we just mentioned have any clear edges at all. They are all deeply interconnected, and you cannot say where one stops and the other begins. The canyon runs west, so the types of vegetation on the north and south walls are very different from each other, and are involved in an intimate dance with the arc of the sun every day. The way they cling to the respective walls determines the rate of rock erosion, and this, assisted by wind and rain, drives the ever-changing shape of the canyon. The changing shape of the canyon gathers the rain, which further erodes and shapes the canyon, and continuously gives birth to the river below, which is feeding the ocean, which is constantly evaporating into the sky, which feeds the cycle of weather and rain, and so on. In the description I just gave, I used all these separate nouns, like canyon, river, and rain. I have to do that in order to speak at all, in order to map the world that we're looking at. But none of these nouns are really there in the world itself. None of the required separations to make the nouns are actually there. None of these distinct things I am naming exist. There is no canyon distinct from the river. There are no trees existing separately from the arc of the sun. There are no clearly bounded entities anywhere. But since language gives us our world, we see the world as if these separations actually exist. We see the world in terms of a canyon, a river, and so on. These separations exist in our map of the world, but in the world itself, they're not really there.